We have a terrific speaker lined
Yeah,
up
you
for
know,
him.
we were kind of joking around with the whole Jack Bauer and new VPN, but then we were talking to, Bryan back there as a person, and be prepared to be flawed. Like, it was an instant empathetic, like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's going to hit a human side that I think is going to really surprise and delight, and really, so make some noise, ask him questions. He's very forthcoming about his history, which is, it's intriguing.
He's got quite the story to tell you,
Yeah.
and also I think it will resonate very deeply with the Spiceworks community
Yes.
because there is that community element, something that Bryan leans on heavily, which we'll let him tell you all
Yes.
about it.
So yeah, let's make some noise for him, right?
But before that, I just want to do one
Yes,
bit of
do it. You
housekeeping.
do it.
Because I did want to, you said he was very open to questions, which he is. He's
Yes.
very conversational. So certainly Bryan has a presentation planned for you. But at the end of the presentation, he has reserved some time for Q&A.
Right.
So for our friends that are live streaming this from home, there's that Q&A widget. So you can put in questions anytime throughout the presentation that you'd like us to put in front of Bryan. I think we do have our moderator back there probably going to cherry pick some questions for him. And then we also have 3 microphones here in the room.
Hot mics.
Ooh, there,
hot
lights
mic,
are on.
Hot mic, hot mic.
So towards the end of the presentation, if you're feeling like you do have a question that you'd like Bryan to answer, please feel free to just queue up behind one of these mics. First come, first serve. Bryan will get to your questions.
Right.
Sound good?
Is that a plan? All right.
Ho. I said sound good?
Yeah, that sounds better.
Alrighty, and now I want to hear 10 times that amount when we call out Bryan. So before we call him, can we practice a little bit? Make some noise for Bryan Seely.
That's good.
You got to get fired up because I think you're really going to appreciate
Fire up.
what Bryan has to talk to you about today.
Yes.
So you want to do the official?
Let's do it. Please welcome to the stage, Bryan Seely.
Well, that was quite an introduction. I wish I had that every room that I walked in, or at least my teenager could see, because she'd make endless fun of me. Thank you for Spiceworks for having me here. It's an honor, really, and to be able to share stuff with you guys. And so, what are we going to talk about? This is a title that was given to me by a friend and colleague. You might know him, Bruce Schneier. It was his idea for this topic, title, after the action movie ends. But before we get into that, ethical hacker, cybersecurity expert. I was in the Marine Corps for a bit. I still have a haircut, for Pete's sake. I have to eat fast, and I can't let my hair touch my ears. It's a problem. I work for a company as an advisor consulting out of Dubai called Spire Solutions. They sponsor a number of events, get to speak and travel. It's really not a bad gig. Most of my work is related to security consulting, public speaking. I enjoy educating or being up on stage and being able to tell jokes and talk about stuff that we deal with and work with and making a community. And I think that's probably the thing I feel most passionate about. Also co-founded the Black Hat Conference, and I now host their podcast in Riyadh. So the Black Hat MEA, Middle East, Africa. I think we've got 3 or 4 episodes up online, about 20, 30 minutes each. Pretty good. Well, I might be biased. And I was on John McAfee's board up until he passed away, however untimely that was. How I got here. It seems to be the first question people ask me. My mom was like, you should put this in your presentations. And this is when I was like 2. And that's basically the same posture now. It's kind of the South Park meme with the guy just a little bit better of a computer. So, I was trying to solve a problem with Google, along with other directories, about 2014. There's a large-scale manipulation of directory data so that people are able to manipulate what consumers see when they search for certain businesses. My solution to get their attention after going through the proper channels was to make fun of things. So I put Edward Snowden's super secret hiding place on the White House lawn. And then Como News, I think it's like the ABC affiliate in Seattle, filmed it. I also, on film, did change the Library of Congress to the Zoolander School of Kids Who Can't Read Good. It's one of my favorites. That led to that. I was thinking to myself after the funny ones didn't work, because I made a bunch of jokes. I made a concentration camp in North Korea, super mega fun time happy land, renamed the Mormon Church, Scientology Church, Westboro Baptist Church, all the funny but inappropriate for display names. And I didn't single anyone out. Everyone got discriminated against equally, all South Park joke related. But to get their attention, I decided, well, decided sounded like I planned this all out, like I knew what I was doing. Because when you wiretap the Secret Service and the FBI simultaneously, and it works, that's a terrible plan. That's oh no, I gotta call someone before they find me. And I really don't like the feel of burlap and being in like a sack in the back of a Crown Vic, like just not how I want to go. This article came out after I had already gone to the Secret Service office in Seattle to tell them I wiretapped you. Not everything, just inbound calls to Google Maps. And they said, okay, well, we'll get a hold of you. That's it? You're dismissing me? Oh, they think I'm crazy. I mean, I'm not crazy, but just not for this. So there's 3 agents and me in an area about half the size of this stage. And I said, 5 minutes. That's all I need. 5 minutes, and I'll prove it to you, and if I can't, I'll leave. Take out your cell phone, call the DC office of the Secret Service. That's all I want. Hoping he'd do one of maybe 2 or 3 things. Using an Android phone, defaulting to Google as his trusted source of information, and using 4 keywords: Secret Service, Washington, DC. Because whenever we want to look for something, carpet cleaner, Austin, Texas. That's what we look for. That's our sort of default, or how we've been taught. And that's what he did. He pushed call. And it doesn't help that the agent was named Bryan as well for this story, so I'm just going to have to use it anyways. He talks to the guy on the other end, tells him, oh yeah, we're just following up on something, and hangs up. And then my phone got a notification. And I pushed play and speaker, and then I played back the call, and now that all of the agents could hear it, and me, we could hear it ringing, hear the guy answering, and he's like, Secret Service. And that's how it sounds so cool. It's not Secret Service, it's not anything deviating from this deep, short, quick, macho voice. But they weren't paying attention to that. They lost their sense of humor, and then I lost all my stuff. And they said, please put your hands up against the wall. They patted me down, handed me a form. They've got a whole form for your Miranda rights. But they said, you're not under arrest. You're not being detained. Don't worry. I'm like, oh, I'm worrying. But if I'm not being detained, I'm free to go. You were just about ready to let me leave. And I'm like, not now. Don't be a smartass now. You're trying to help. 4 hours later, after many, many, many explanations and repeat demonstrations, the head of the Secret Service on the West Coast called Google and yelled at him. And they took down new map registrations for 2 months. And then does anyone know remember Google Map Maker? Yeah, that went away because of me, I'm sorry. Oh well. Crowdsourcing public information that couldn't possibly be misused. Who would have thought? So then, they said they fixed it. And a year later, I gave a TED Talk called Wiretapping the Secret Service Can Be Easy and Fun. And I made this for a demonstration. It was a snowboarding shop in the White House called Edward's Snow Den. It's the worst pun I have ever made, and I stand by it. Thank you. That has never gotten applause. I have found my people. Now, we've all seen the movie, or most of us have seen the movie Taken. I have a very particular set of skills. It seems to be, I'm working on the impression. I know I'm younger and I'm about the same height, but he portrays a character in a movie who's this action hero, ex-CIA, covert ops, ex-army, working crappy bodyguarding job. Daughter gets kidnapped in spectacular fashion and ultimately trafficked. And at the last minute, he's able to rescue her. I'm spoiling the movie. It's been out since 2008. Oh well, you'll live. He rescues her, and then the last scene is him taking her to meet a celebrity pop star for voice lessons. It's great. That's it? You just got on a plane home after rescuing your kid and everyone's just fine? That wasn't my experience when my daughter was trafficked. The behind the scenes is messy, and life is very messy. I had a choice to make at one point, and I needed someone qualified to tell me which sort of direction to go. Do I stay? The hook is a very easy, famous hacker wiretap Secret Service, keynote speaker, LinkedIn title, just writes itself. People answer my invitations. They want to hear about that like a train wreck, or wow, look at that idiot did. It is the smartest and dumbest thing I've ever done so far. But it gets people's attention. It brought me to the stage. It got me the opportunity to speak. First time ever speaking was for TEDx. But the real life stuff, but no one ever leaves any of that type of presentation feeling like there's a connection. Maybe in some loose sort of hacker terms, where they understood how it happened. But it's very superficial, and it's a very tempting road to be sort of too Instagram polished. Everything's perfect. This was all planned, and I'm super smart. None of those things are the case. February 2014, wiretap the Secret Service. My second kid was born December 13th, 2014. So I have 2 children, at that point, 7 and a newborn. When my son was a year old, I got full custody of both of them. So I had, 7-year-old and a 1-year-old. I also became a foster parent to my stepkid, who had been living in state housing for a couple of months while her mom was going through a rough patch. 3 kids, that's tough. I don't care who you are. I don't care if there's 2 of you. I don't care if there's 2 of you per kid. They are menaces, but I love them so much. It's just hard to maintain a career, switching tasks, and the 16-year-old has drug problems. And I wish I could say I didn't understand them, but I'm a recovering addict. And at 2014, I was a year clean and sober. And I wasn't like, marijuana. I did a whole marijuana. It was like I was a homeless meth addict twice after coming back from Iraq. I didn't know anything else. I didn't listen to anybody. She was primarily opiates and heroin, and got her into rehab. She stayed clean for a year living with me. And then she didn't really like me, and that's kind of the stepdaughter-dad cliche, so she called me Bryan. She never called me Dad. But you love her anyways. And I have a baby, and I have a 2nd grader, so it's just too much to manage. And the perfect storm, I wouldn't say perfect, but Thanksgiving Day, 2016, I think it is, my mom was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. However, she lives in Japan. I grew up in Tokyo, obviously. I lived there about 14, 15 years of my life, grew up as a missionary kid. My life was bonkers from day one. I have a Japanese middle name. I speak Japanese, so if anyone doesn't believe me or they speak it, you can test me later. It'll be fine. So my mom and dad are in Japan, and I don't have any close support or family. I burned most of my family relations by being a drug addict, and that's what happens. So I had the support of some 12-step people, but then your mom gets sick and you can't really go because you're not financially stable. And 3 days after Christmas, my daughter went missing. And I know how to ramp up into crisis mode, for sure. Go after your kid, no question. It was people in the community that helped me find her that I had never met, that were in DEF CON. Now I'm in Slack channels with some of them I've still never met, that dropped everything to help me look at metadata, teach me more about OSINT, learn techniques that ultimately we were using Backpage to track my kid and the number that was changing and what provider, and triangulation of text messages and testing these phone numbers to try and figure out what area she might have been in. 5 weeks later, I was able to tell the FBI task force for commercially exploited minors. So anyone under 18 gets looked for by the FBI and local police. And I was able to lead them to her 5 weeks later. And they didn't believe me either. Like, there's this crazy guy, it's 1 a.m, we're in the middle of North Seattle in a really crappy area, and you say your kid's in this house? But she was there. And they did a health and welfare, got her to a hospital, spent a month waiting to get her into rehab, and mission accomplished. Action movie's over. Let's go find that pop singer. But that's not what happened. I didn't know anything about self-care. I didn't know anything about really going to therapy. I didn't know anything about depression or what I was going through. I was numb. I started getting into a relationship with somebody, re-downloaded Tinder 100 times. I mean, never do it at 10 in the morning. It's always at like 10 p.m. at night. Anyone else? No? I started taking Adderall out of my prescription to stay awake because I didn't want to sleep. And I have narcolepsy. That's why I got out of the Marine Corps. I have type 1, which means I'm tired all the time, which means I get stimulants, which means I'm sweaty, which means the makeup lady had extra work to do. Couldn't make me better looking, at least you could make me less sweaty. So I abused my prescription meds to stay awake because I didn't want to be asleep, because the nightmares were getting bad and I didn't have a solution for it. And I didn't have a job and I was running out of money and I have 2 kids at home. And I'm trying to keep it all together by dating and not dealing with the issue, not talking about it with anybody, and ultimately feeling like a failure as a father. And when I ran out of food and money, the only thing left in my house was my kids' furniture and their toys and their clothes. Everything else I had sold. That's when it was too much. And ironically, there's a lot of funny in this for me now. I had pawned my last handgun and used it to buy Xanax to commit suicide, and it didn't work. Like, I'm not a planner, let's see. 2 days later, I woke up, and it was worse than when I had gone to sleep, because now I got to watch my kids leave. And they'd spent 6 months watching their dad implode, not taking them to do stuff, not watching TV, not watching the video they want to watch, not spending anything but the minimum time. Because I should have been asking for help. I asked for help for finding my other kid, but I didn't know how to deal with this or this. And I didn't know what it was going to take to figure that out. And it wasn't the nightmares I wouldn't wish on anyone, and the negative thought patterns that started to pop up of your kids will, the sooner you kill yourself, the sooner your kids will forget you and they'll be able to heal. The world will be better off without you. And I've heard other people say this, which means I know we all have this negative voice, and there's another thing you can tell it. You can just go, tell it it's wrong. Tell it to F off. You don't have to listen. But it was too much to watch my kids leave. So I got into the VA psych ward. And I slept and cried for 4 days. And talked to the therapist there. And got out and went back to my empty house. And I had 90 days to get my kids back. And by a lot of miracles that I won't really go into, I got them back with 15 minutes to spare. And then tried to build a life back again. It's like now I've got, kids are great and all, but you got to feed them every day. And change the paper in the cage, and you can't leave them in the car, there's paperwork. It's a lot of work. But they are literally the best thing that's ever happened to me. And the reason I exist and the reason I do this is so I can provide for them. And I don't know what I'd do without them. So my other daughter's safe. My kids ended up with a foster family who turned out to be second cousins. I'd never met them. They had no idea. We found out later. And then I met a therapist who introduced me to Brené Brown. My doctor, Dr. Kwame, Kristen. I still see her today, about once a week. One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. Well, somebody needs to pray for that poor bastard, because that's just rough. Pardon my French. Forbes did a survey recently, like June. More than half of us take medications for our mental health, but it's almost never talked about. There's so much stigma in our culture. 51% of information security professionals in this survey identified as burnt out. 65% were considering not just leaving the job, leaving the industry completely. I have a high school friend who was a cop in Australia, my age, 40. He's getting out on disability because he's been in the child protection sort of unit, and you can't unsee certain amounts of things. And it messes with you. And no matter how strong you think you are, there's a limited amount of exposure you can have before you need to take care of it. You can't. Like if you get heat stroke, you can't be in extreme heat ever again. They teach us that in the Marine Corps. It'll damage you. Like if you get ejected out of a plane once, you're never flying again. Because if you get ejected twice, the compression on your spine can kill you. Because it's basically dynamite on a chair with the parachute by the lowest bidder. So the stuff we don't talk about. These are common life stressors: death of spouse, divorce, marital separation, incarceration, AKA quarantine pandemic. The world had the same problem at the same time. Couldn't see friends, couldn't get our support. All our routines are completely altered. Death of a family member, major personal injury or illness. Getting married. Because marriage is hard. It's work. It's worth it, but it's work. Being fired or laid off from work. Marital reconciliation and retirement. Now, if I said, I'm a famous hacker who wiretapped the Secret Service, that doesn't resonate really at all with anyone here. But I know this list gets most of you. Maybe some people are multiple. We all have stories and probably don't know how to bring up some of this stuff. I know I didn't. So I just look at therapy like red teaming and blue teaming. If you're not familiar with the terms, red teaming is like pen testing. Trying to break into a company, find the vulnerabilities and the weak spots, and then the blue team defends, and then you go back and fix them all. That's therapy. You walk in going, I don't know how to deal with this. For me, my issues are overcoming addiction, which now I celebrated 5 years on August 11th. That was the day I went to the psych ward. August 5th was the day I attempted suicide. And I don't ever have to go back to that. But the idea that other people might, because they didn't hear this, breaks my heart, because you don't have to feel that alone. Which is why going to therapy isn't punishment. I will not skip going to therapy. I will cancel almost anything to go. And I remember thinking, this is stupid. Why would I pay money to somebody just to hear myself talk? But the thing about it is, if you keep stuff inside, it will physically get you sick. Stress. There's tons of research about it, and we should probably, as IT people, be the best at finding those things. We're good researchers. We're good Googlers. That's why they made it. But we don't want to find out that we might have depression or that there isn't a solution. I'm telling you there is. I've had and been on antidepressants, didn't want to be, and now I am not on them, but I was for years. It took a while to get back off. It keeps the bottom from falling out of your life. And there's a stigma associated with it. Who cares? The people that would dare judge you for any of it, they don't matter. Easily a top 3 save my life activity. I had to learn what self-care meant. I had a guy in recovery ask me what it meant or what my routines were, and I gave him some BS answer. And he said, I'm going to call you in 3 weeks, and you better give me the right answer, because that was just BS that you made up. I learned that I need to exercise daily, so I made a walking treadmill desk. That helped. Walk my son to the bus stop, starts me off in the day, start doing pull-ups again. I've lost about 100 pounds in the last 10 years, cutting out sugar, cutting out carbs, but I'm an emotional eater. It's like one of the only vices you have left. If you give up drugs and alcohol, what are you going to do? Like, it's food. You can leave alcohol in my house. I won't drink it, but if you dare leave Cinnabon, I will be fat and we will not be friends. I learned how to eat healthy without having a girlfriend or wife or someone telling me I had to, because I started caring about who I was enough to learn how to do it and how important sleep is. Professional help like a doctor. Being honest with them. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel normal. The canary in the coal mine for me is the point where I'm numbed most of the day. I'm tired all the time. I don't have anything I'm looking forward to, even though I have a ton of good things in my life. And I no longer am looking forward to doing something with my kids that day, like watching Dragon Ball with my son or playing video games with my daughter. Love doing both of those things. I know I love doing those things. So when I feel like I don't, that's my boundary now. And that's when I need to go do some. So I go back to therapy and I say, hey, am I doing all the things right? I don't feel, something feels off. And it's another pair of eyes. And I start with therapy, but then I start talking to other people within my social circles because my therapist isn't always available. She's got a life, and I'm needy. Well, not as much as I used to be. And Brené Brown talked about it a lot. Leave shame, judgment, emotion, leave it out of the door. That doesn't help you. Your ego doesn't help you. Pick one. Famous hacker forever, but never talk about anything real. That's ego. That's an awesome title. Or talk about a way to help people, find a way to connect, find a way to get off the elevated platform and be amongst, you guys are my people. Like, you can quote Star Trek episodes, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and we could do that all day while building VMs, hacking stuff, watching YouTube, playing with Rubik's Cubes, and building Lego. Did I get everyone? That's my day. And if I'm up here, it's not because I'm amazing and smart. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed. I found out I was decent at talking to people, I think. But this is, I think, my calling. The community thing. Every single day I try to call somebody, I try to be part of a Slack channel, Discord server, community. Even showing up and listening is an act of service. It is being helpful. Sometimes you can help somebody, sometimes you're just listening and helping them. Sometimes you're asking for help. By asking for help, you're giving someone an opportunity to be helpful. If you don't have a mentor, get one. If you don't have a mentee, get one. I try to find a way to laugh every day. So I watch stand-up comedy deliberately. Sometimes it's forced fun. Daniel Sloss, Taylor Tomlinson, if you haven't watched, brilliant. Talks about mental health, and she's hysterical. Monty Python. Anything funny. It just pulls your head out of the water just a little bit. And for some reason, we treat depression and loneliness with isolation instead of going, I'm sad. I'm lonely today. Would you mind coming over and hanging out? Why is that so hard? Because it's scary to get a no or to find out your friend doesn't care? I promise you we do. I know I need that. So I ask that of others in my circles. So if you are white knuckling it or coping and you're not enjoying your life and not thriving, that's your body telling you something's wrong. And it's a cue to fix it. Pain normalized over long periods of time yields nothing good. Again, ego isn't your friend. Be humble or humility will be brought to you. I liked that quote someone told me. I have a book coming out with a lot of this content. I don't know when. My co-author is a professional ghostwriter, but he's not ghostwriting this book because I would consider that lying, because I'm not a good writer. He's a good writer. He's also writing John McAfee's bio, and that took precedence with the whole Netflix thing, and it should have. These are the people I would recommend, and I watch almost on a daily basis, and has changed a lot of the way I view nutrition and mental health. But Brené Brown is amazing. She's from Texas. She is a vulnerability researcher, I think is how she goes by. Started with a TED Talk, has Netflix specials, books, podcasts. She's amazing. Andrew Huberman podcasts, Rich Roll podcast, Diary of a CEO, all on YouTube. Taylor Tomlinson on Netflix, Daniel Sloss on Netflix or Amazon Prime. He's got amazing specials, and he's dark. So be warned. Again, community. I wouldn't be here. All of my failures are mine and mine alone because I tried to do it without help. All of it. It didn't work. All the good stuff that I have is suggestions from other people. I can't take credit. I didn't invent any of this crap. All the good ideas that I'm presenting to you was other people's stuff. All it took was floating in the water, raising my hand saying, hey, I'd like the boat to pick me up, please. And I found out that there's a lot of other people floating in the water going, I think I can make it. But once you get in the boat, you realize there's a lot of other people who know how cold it is and how you feel like super alone. And you don't ever have to do that again. Whether it's depression or addiction or medical issue 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. People care, a lot. Otherwise, they wouldn't do things like this. This is why these events are really important. Introductions, random connections that you don't know why, maybe until years later that it's important. But if you practice with like, hey man, you like Rubik's Cubes? All right, cool, let's do this. And then your wife leaves you. Maybe that's the person you mention it to. And then, oh, me too. I know how that feels. Because I take breakups hard. It hurts. And the last few years has been brutal. My mom died on my birthday 3 years ago. And she was amazing until the very end. My dad was able to remarry and moved back here and met a woman just as amazing as my mom. And I have the opposite track record. That like every meal, my dating life was like every meal I'd ever eaten, every one of them gave me food poisoning. So I'm not like rushing back out into screwing that up again. And the common denominator is me. That's what sucks. We are approaching time for questions. There is hybrid remote people. There are also the rest of you guys. So we didn't talk about MFA. MFA is very important, by the way. And the only unbeatable form of MFA that I know of, and Kevin Mitnick and I both agree, we just talked last week, is FIDO YubiKeys. He uses those. His employees all use them mandatorily. They haven't found a way to break them yet. Everything else, breakable. So now that we've gotten that important bit out of the way, to make it an official technology talk. If you do not want to ask a question in front of everyone else, you are more than welcome to message me in private. I will get to you when I can. Otherwise, be as open or ask any. I'll talk about anything. We have virtual audience question. How is your relationship with your kids now? Amazing. My daughter and I text cat pictures back and forth. She's 14. She's in the gifted program at school. When I'm not flying for traveling, I'm home raising my kids. This allows me to be home when they get home from school. This allows me to literally watch Dragon Ball Super episodes with my son every day. And then he doesn't brush his teeth when I tell him to, but he'll brush his teeth if I'm doing it with him. Go figure. And he doesn't like taking his ADHD medication by himself. I found him throwing pills because he didn't want something to be wrong with him. It's like, there's nothing wrong with you, man. I got to take this stuff too. He goes, really? So we bought a workbook and we go through it together. We take our meds together, and he takes it happily because Dad takes them too. And Dad's a hacker. And to him, hacker is one level above admin because all he knows is Minecraft and YouTube videos. But to him, it's still a good thing.
Oh, you mentioned a lot of your projects. What project, professionally or personally, are you most proud of?
The book and this speech right now. I've never told this story. You're welcome. Yeah, I knew there wouldn't be a whole bunch of questions. Everyone just wants to... Go ahead, sir.
So my name is Wilson. One of my common topics is burnout.
Yeah.
Just want to throw this one out to the crowd and you. How does everybody feel about boredom?
I was actually reading about that and learning about it in Dopamine Nation. And if you haven't read it, it talks about the cycles of dopamine and pain and pleasure seeking and all this other stuff. Well, boredom isn't always a bad thing. Because if you're always looking for something to entertain you, it's like, I have to be doing this, and I have to be making productive use of my time, and you're not bored, you're not giving your brain a chance and your body a chance to breathe and relax and normalize and find homeostasis. So the more you seek pleasure, like with drugs, like cocaine or methamphetamines or anything like that, it tips and you go out of balance and they stop working and you have to go back the other way to be able to normalize and find sort of like a center. So boredom is a good thing. Relaxing should be a mandatory meditation on a daily basis if you can. And it doesn't mean you have to be awesome at it. It just means I'm sitting down for 15 minutes, focusing on my breath. My ADHD will take over, and I will think about squirrels. And then I wonder if the squirrels meditate, and then get back to the breathing. But it wasn't productive, forced work. Oh, what did I do in the military? And how did I get into tech? I failed out of college for drinking too much and not being able to handle college at like 17 years old. So military was more like running. I made it into what is the Defense Language Institute. I already spoke Japanese. I got diagnosed with narcolepsy 2 years in. Got a top secret clearance. Did never make it into production fleet Marine Corps. I made it to the rank of corporal, which is an E4, which shouldn't have been possible because that's a harder thing to achieve in infantry and other units, but I've got a medical discharge, honorable, and went to Iraq as a contractor. Kind of felt like she got cheated out of, or I cheated, and because I joined right after 9/11. I wanted to serve my country. And I was ashamed of being sick, having something wrong with me. That I couldn't have prevented or done anything. And narcolepsy, turns out, it's autoimmune stress triggered. Like boot camp, maybe? Sleep deprivation techniques, maybe? I don't know. Could be. I mean, it's just a guess. I'm not an expert. How did I get into tech? I've always been in tech, sort of. The day in school where they learn or they teach you how to talk to girls, I must have been at home on the computer. Always liked computers. I was getting paid at the age of like 13 to teach people how to use their Performa 520 Mac. Are you a member of Imager or IMGR or whatever, how you pronounce it? I'd love to see your history. You want to see my browser history? You can't handle my browser history. So many cat memes. I don't think I spend a lot of time there. I have a 14-year Reddit badge. I did have a front page AMA at one point. Woo. It was a fun bucket list at the moment, at the time. In the audience.
What are the cybersecurity implications of Edward Snowden becoming a Russian citizen now? Want your opinion?
Becoming a Russian citizen. I don't think it changes much. I mean, he's in Russia, he's been in Russia. We've known that. I mean, him going public was a defense against getting black bagged to some dark site, right? If he gets Russian citizenship, is he suddenly going to be more formally disclosing? Everything he disclosed, funny, most of it was very, very true, and we didn't know it. And did anyone do anything differently afterwards? No. Like, we all just went like, yeah, that sounds about right. And we all went on about our days. Like, I could tell you your password gets hacked and how many of you are going to change it. Half of us might remember. We're all so busy and burnt out, it's just not making the priority list. you can agree or disagree with how Snowden went about it or what he released. I think his intent was good. I think his execution was poor. I think there was some attention seeking. I also happen to know somebody who worked at the NSA, who I was close friends with at the time, who saw his resume come across his desk, and I know he lied on his resume. So, Russian citizen or not, I don't think it really makes any difference. His loyalty is, that's between him and his conscience. On the spectrum here too, do you make time to get outside or do you focus more on meditation? According to Andrew Huberman and the Huberman podcast and every research bit I've done, vitamin D / sunlight exposure early in the morning helps a lot. Whether you take that advice, like go for a walk, listen to a podcast. I like to take a weighted vest and go up and down this loop of hills near my house. It feels kind of like punishing myself, and then you get stronger and hoorah. It's a total weird Marine Corps thing. It's really hard to kind of contextualize because it's demented. The physical component of mental health that you do, weightlifting. I have a pull-up bar in my garage. On the other side of the sound wall thing that I built for my backdrop, because I'm single, I'm unsupervised, so I can build whatever I want, and I don't have to ask anyone permission. However, my 14-year-old does seem to think I'm immature because I want to buy a $450 Lego excavator, and she doesn't think that's a good use of money. But what if there's an emergency? She is wrong. And I have a debit card. The physical component, yeah, weightlifting helps a lot. It burns tons of calories, where muscle burns way more calories than fat. Boosts your metabolism, you feel way better, the endorphins are amazing, and it feels like a hack. I was 350 pounds and now I'm about 260. I still sweat, but that's mainly just because I'm a little out of shape and have to take stimulants for staying awake. Otherwise, it's a very boring speech with me curled up over here sleeping. Sir.
Yeah, I do have a question, but I first want to say my dad, when he died, was 7 years clean, and he was a very successful man, but that was the most proud I ever was of him, so congratulations again on your sobriety.
Thank you, and congrats to your dad. You guys
Thank you. Recently I had a coworker who had a lot of external stressors. He was going through a divorce, his meds were messed up through the VA. It was a big mess, and it ended up affecting his work. He's no longer with our department. Was with the job, is that when someone's having those external stressors, is it a benefit better to say, okay, be on your merry, you're hurting our productivity, or is the structure something that's beneficial to them, or is it really just dependent on the individual? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I ran into that with a couple of different times at work. I actually got a job, and in all 3 interviews, told them the biggest challenge I had to overcome in life was being a drug addict, and I got the job. So that was like, okay, these people are at least open-minded enough. And I used the American Disability Act to get a room to be able to take a nap in for sleeping at work, because I can't function without a nap. I don't care what you think about that. I need a nap. I'm tired. I have narcolepsy. What do you want me to do about that? Like, if I could choose to not have that, like, re-up it, I wouldn't. If the company has more than 25 people, you can get a disability accommodation that's reasonable, or you can take a sabbatical, you can get family medical emergency leave, or maybe you need to leave for a while, take a sabbatical, focus on mental health. But that loses, like leaving the military, you lose all your friends. Leaving your job, you're losing a core group of support and people who could be caring about you. You're not seeing them every day. The chances of you isolating more and feeling worse go way up. And then, hey, add a pandemic. That's going to be awesome. I'm sure everyone will do fine. We didn't. Luckily, I was involved with a bunch of different groups and had support built in. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it. I couldn't make it through life before the pandemic very well. I still literally have to pay someone to wake me up in the mornings because I don't wake up for an alarm anymore. I'm used to someone screaming at me or being in a relationship. And if I don't have either one of those, I will auto-attendant my way through wake-up calls, alarm clocks. So someone will physically come over to my house, and it costs money. It sucks. But it allows me to be alive and a parent. So if that makes me less than, sign me up, because that's the only way I can do it. Check on them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Got a couple minutes left. And then there was a question on the prompter I wanted to see that said something about lying awake at night, but go until you guys can pull that one back up.
Yeah, two things. One, I just want to say thank you for bringing a hard topic to the table today.
You're very welcome.
It's clearly not easy to talk about.
No, but it's important enough.
Yes. So that said, I want to step away from that a little bit and ask a little bit more of a shallow question to clear the frog from my throat.
Oh, I'm plenty shallow. Go ahead.
You described kind of a systemic issue in cybersecurity a little indirectly, just in the form of, we see these problems, we see vulnerabilities, and we want to bring them to the table, but sometimes that's not an option. So you bring something to the table in a joking fashion, and nothing happens. So then you really bring the vulnerability to the table, and you get read your Miranda rights. And there's kind of no in-between sometimes, and I know certainly working in cybersecurity, we all have that list of, hey, I know about this problem, but I have to protect myself before I protect you, and bringing that to the table without bringing your Miranda rights to the table is something I think is still an issue today, and how do you feel about that?
Find someone online on Twitter who's a reputable pen tester or journalist in that space, Brian Krebs, somebody like that. Ask their advice on how to go about it, find a group consensus, maybe like a Spiceworks community, I don't know, maybe, and then get what the best practice is for addressing it. It's different in every circumstance, but escalate, get it off your back, don't make the decision by yourself, because that's a really quick way to get in trouble and look like an attention seeker or clout chaser, I think is what the kids are calling it these days. I often lie awake at night with thoughts racing, especially if I'm encountering an issue at work. Do you experience this, and how do you deal with it? Meditation, pray to whatever God you want to believe in, to something bigger than yourself, and realize through Stoicism, it's something you can't control, nothing you can do right now. Write it down and save it for later and let it go. And that is 2-1-0. Thank you for having me.